I'd like to say once more, Warren, how bad is it out there?
Well, it's not so bad in the economy. It's bad for a great many of our citizens. Overall, though, the economy's done very well. I mean, it's been a slow recovery, but it was a extreme wound that the economy had received, like none in my lifetime. So it's not totally surprising that it's taken us a while to come back. But ever since the fall of 2009, the recovery has come back steadily. It hasn't accelerated, but it hasn't flattened out either. And that's the way it is now. And you know, even 2% a year growth, if the population grows 1%, that means in a generation, people are living on average 20% better than the generation before. That is not bad. It'd be better if it's 3%. But,
right.
But we have a wonderful economy, and you've seen it heal faster than the other major economies around the world.
There, how about back there, okay?
Hi, general question about your thoughts. You said you bought your first stock in 1942. I think right around that time, sometime after World War II, I think prior to that, the sterling was the world currency. Then it switched to the US dollar not too long after that. At the time, any other country, very similar to markets today, you have to be able to cover your debt. You have to be able to have enough in order to borrow against, at that time, the sterling. And now we're looking at a situation with the amount of debt ceiling. I think what's different between now and ever before is there is the risk of the devaluation or the issue of the US dollar not being the world currency. What's your views? Do you see that happening? Because there's an awful lot of fear and discussion about it now.
Yeah, unless we do something incredibly foolish, and I don't think we will, the dollar will be the world's currency for a long, 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 long time. We came out of World War II actually with a higher debt to GDP than we have now. All of our debt is printed in our own currency. I mean, that's the key. And then the question is, do you abuse that in some way so that the currency declines in value at a rapid rate? Well, interestingly enough, I was born in 1930. The dollar from 1930 is worth about 6 cents today. So I've lived during a period where the dollar's lost 94% of its value in terms of purchasing power. And yet at the same time, in real terms, the GDP of the country per capita has gone up 6 for 1. So we've had 6 for 1. Just think of that, one person's lifetime. We went centuries in the world where the gains were in nothing in a century, or a few percent, and 6 for 1 in one person's lifetime. At the same time, our currency has decreased, well, it went from $1 to 6 cents, and that 94%, and that, despite all of that, we are the world's reserve currency, and people are willing to lend us money for nothing, virtually, currently in large sums, and I do not see that changing unless we do something incredibly foolish. Now, we have to stabilize the debt as a percentage of GDP, which means we can have debt increase by 2 to 3% a year if GDP grows 2 to 3% a year. And I think that's a very realistic possibility. We can't keep having debt grow at a faster rate than GDP, although it can go on for a long time, and it has gone on for a long time. Our country, the people think it's falling apart. I think that's not remotely the case. I was just on a program this morning with Sarah Blakely and Fred Smith. I mean, here are two people, that it took something very common, the postal service and airplanes or something, and they saw needs and they filled them, and they're thinking of new things to do tomorrow. I mean, the secret sauce in America, is basically, the people in this room and the fact that you're all trying to make your life better tomorrow, and you'll come up with ways to do it. So the country works, and it may get gummed up somewhat by Washington sometimes, but it won't get ruined.
Another question.
Hi, I'm Melody Hobson. So
okay.
I want to do a follow-up question to the first question about the currency issue. A lot of that is coming from rhetoric from China that the global economy should be de-Americanized and internationalized is the word that is being used. And I was in China last week where a Chinese official called this the century of the Pacific, that The last century was the century of the Atlantic, which was the US and Western Europe, and this century is the century of the Pacific. I wonder what you think about China, their growing influence, them being our largest debt holder, et cetera, and what the long-term prospects are for the emerging markets.
Yeah, well, your friend sounds to me more like an ad man than an economist, but China is going to be enormously important, and they should be. I mean, it will be an economic powerhouse, but so will the United States be. And what is important is that the two countries largely learn to live together. I mean, we are going to both be superpowers, and we've got a lot of common interests, and we've got some things we differ on, and that'll always be the case. But the thing to remember is overwhelmingly we should figure out how to get along. But the United States will be the superpower of the world for a very, very, very long time. China will be gaining in importance for a very, very, very long time, but they start from a lower base. They also have a whole lot more people, so that at some point in aggregate, they're going to catch us in GDP. In terms of GDP per capita, I wouldn't want to bet on that one.
Well, and their political systems, what would you say about that, assuming ours is working correctly?
Yeah, it's tough for me to figure out what's happening in this country, it really exists. But well, the interesting thing is, in 1790, we had a little under 4 million people. China had 300 million people. They had similar resources. They had similar climate. They worked just as hard. They were just as smart. And in the next 200 years, we had 25% of the world's GDP, starting with these 4 million people, and they didn't really go anyplace. And then in the last 40 or 50 years, they have just galloped forward. And so they are starting to unleash human potential in China the same way we've been unleashing human potential since 1776, and I'm all for that. We should much prefer to have a prosperous China than a China that has problems. I mean, if you postulate two worlds, one in which we're an island of prosperity, 315 million people, and the rest of the world is sitting there envious of, that, or postulate something where the rest of the world is growing even faster than we are, but we're also benefiting. I mean, just choose which world you want, and then think about which world you want if the other guy's got some nuclear weapons and happens to be envious of you. I mean, it is in our interest that the rest of the world does well, and in particular China.
Okay.
Barbara Novick with BlackRock. First of all, I love your enthusiasm and your optimism. Have you given any thought to retirement planning and the longevity problem? Not for yourself,
Throw her out,
but
throw her out.
facing the country. And what should we as a society be doing to help people who are clearly going to live a lot longer?
Yeah, I'm 83 and I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my life. So the main thing to do is to be involved with something you love. I mean, I tell the students that, and something. I tell them to take the job you'd take if you're already independently rich. Well, that's what I've got, and we are going to have a problem in this country. We're not going to have a problem in terms of turning out more and more stuff. I mean, the market system works marvelously in turning out things people want. I mean, it's the marvel of the world, and it'll continue to be. I mean, look at what just Apple's done in recent years. The market system works on turning out stuff. The more specialized it becomes, the more people it will leave behind in terms of getting the bounty of that, unfortunately. And frankly, that's where government has to come in. We have gone in 1982, the Forbes 400, I apologize for using the term here, but the Forbes 400 had 90 billion of net worth. They had 2,020 billion this year, over 20 times as much. All-time record. The people in this room overwhelmingly are doing better than they were 5 years ago. The people who will serve us lunch later on are not. And the trickle down has not worked very well. It's still better than being an economy that doesn't go anyplace, but we have solved the problem of more and more goods. We have not solved the problem of having a country with $50,000 of GDP per person and having 20% of the families, 25 million families, 60 million people living in households with $21,000 of income or less. And that's our challenge, and that gets into the problem of the aged and all of that. people in their working years have to take care not only the old to some extent, but of course they take care of the young. And they sort of tie it with the old to what they produced over life. They don't tie it that way in the young. I mean, if you have 10 children, and I mean, you still get school places for each one of them and all of that. So that will be the challenge. I think we'll be up to that challenge, and we've certainly got the ingredients to be up to that challenge. We are wealthy. We are a wealthy family, and a number of members of the family aren't really sharing in that the way I would hope they would.
And you, of course, have spoken out quite loudly about this problem in your viewpoint about what should be done about taxes.
Yeah.
And you don't any change in what you think about that?
No, I hesitate bringing it up, but even last year, my tax rate, counting payroll taxes, was the lowest in the office of 25 people, and I have no tax shelters. I just thank you, lobbyists.
Right.
They've taken care of me. I mean, I filed a tax return every year since I was 13, and we took the years by decades and compared taxes to taxable income. And the last decade, and believe me, it's been my best decade, has been just about the lowest of any decade in terms of my tax rate. And it was tougher when I was selling shirts at Penny's.
And a big part of this problem is that people never stop to think about the employment tax.
The payroll tax is $900 billion. It's 30% of our total government expenditures, very roughly. And it quits at 5,000 or something like that. So it's regressive, basically. I mean, my payroll tax as a percentage of my total income is zilch. The payroll tax of most of the people in the office as a percentage, is now again 15+%. And if they've got spouses working, you can have a household of 200,000 of income, and they've got 15% payroll taxes right off the bat. It's gotten pretty extreme. If you look at the distribution of taxes over since World War II, the payroll tax has just consistently gone up as a percentage of the total revenues of the government. Actually, and corporate income taxes have gone down dramatically. Corporate income taxes used to be 4% of GDP. They're now 1.5% of GDP. Corporate profits are at an all-time record. But we hear all the lobbyists for the corporation telling us how, we're not competitive with the rest of the world and everything, which is a lot of baloney.
So there. And
yeah, put me down as undecided.